we'll start our discussion with Julia. She'll give a quick presentation, and hopefully it'll inspire some good questions.
All right, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to see the turnout of so many chefs and restaurant industry folks who are interested in coming together and facilitating a healthier food system and figuring out what we can all do in our capacities and our individual roles to make that happen. I'm just going to say a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from so you can get a sense of the perspective that I'm going to be giving. I am a former chef. I worked in New York at restaurants like Union Pacific and spent several years working at La Bernardin under Eric Repair. And then I moved to a series of restaurants that I felt more had a different philosophy about sort of supporting the local food system and working with the local purveyors and growers. I worked at Blue Hill, and then I became the chef of a small restaurant in Brooklyn called Applewood that is very much in line with the kind of cooking that Spike does at Woodberry. It was all local farms and whole animal butchery and lots of preservation stuff, but on a much smaller scale than what Spike's doing. And then I moved to California and continued the same style of cooking at a restaurant called Ammo in the Hollywood area. At that point, I sort of wanted to move to the more research and systems and policy side of food and entered academia, where I earned a master's in public policy and now have been working towards my doctorate at the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins, where I work with the Center for a Livable Future. And that's our kind of conceptual model there, where we look at the sort of intersection between the food environment and public health and diet and production. And that's the sort of research that's done there. You can go to their website. There's a lot of really interesting research about the way the food system works and how it influences public health, both from the dietary and consumption side and the environmental side. I've been asked today to talk a little bit about best practices from sourcing and utilizing local produce. I'm just going to do this from my own experience, basically, and from some just general best practices. And then I also just want to really briefly touch on a few other food system issues where I think chefs are in a particularly strong position to have an impact, namely the issue of food waste and just the role of cooking in American culture and how the challenges that pose to our system as we move forward, and some of the dietary and environmental issues with our food system. So similar to Spike, we've got a lot of buzzwords that are thrown around pretty willy-nilly. We've got the local, the seasonal, farm to table, sustainability. We all like to talk about those things. A lot of people talk about those things. Far fewer people are actually practicing them in a really meaningful way, and there's a difference. And it's not rocket science to really source local food, sustainable food that's responsibly grown, I guess I would say. It's not really any different from what we all do in our restaurants all the time. It just takes, I think, a little bit extra attention to detail, a little bit extra work, a little bit extra cost, but there's ways we can manage that to make it feasible. I'm not going to really talk too much about this, but just we're here because we all know that this is important. We import a ton of fruits and vegetables from all over the world into this country, even when many of those exact same products are grown in our local food systems. We are shipping food even within this country, aside from what we import, all over the place. We're growing things in huge monocultures, which is really sapping the resources from the environment. And we don't necessarily need to be doing that. These products are grown in many places right in our backyards. And when we can take, as restaurants and as chefs, our buying power, small or large, and really work with local farmers and local food systems, it helps local farmers, with more, build their businesses, and it helps the environment, and it keeps more food dollars in the local economy as well, which, completes that cycle. So, like I said, it's nothing really out of the ordinary or some magic, formula to make this happen. You have to start a conversation with the farmers that work in your area and you can buy from. Go to the markets, visit farms, talk to them directly. You see if you can buy directly from them. I spent lots of time buying at farmers markets, but then after talking with farmers, sometimes they deliver right to the restaurants. They'll grow things for you. You can start a conversation about what things you might want to have available, and it's same thing you do with any purveyor, basically. And then managing, how to implement using local ingredients, using seasonal ingredients. When I was in LA, it didn't really matter. Everything's in season all year round. You can do whatever you want. You can go to the farmer's market in Santa Monica and get an awesome tomato in, December. Here, and when I was in New York, seasons actually mean something, and that presents a real challenge. You gotta, use preservation techniques, pickling, I'm a big fan of. Canning, obviously, freezing some things, drying is appropriate in other cases. In terms of meats, I like curing and smoking stuff. But, preservation is key. And then also just using everything, getting every last cent out of every, piece of produce that you get in. If you're getting beets, you're using the beet. You're using the beet greens. You're using radish greens. Nothing goes to waste. This not coincidentally also helps deal with the food waste issue, but it also helps keep costs down and enables you to buy those local products that are more expensive and still, make your food cost goals. And the good news is that it is possible to charge a little bit more. Research has shown that in a restaurant setting, not only in the stores, customers are willing to pay a little bit more for local and organic, but they have to understand what they're paying for. You have to be able to communicate what you're doing in a way that's not, preachy or holier than thou, but, helps build public awareness. I'd say that, so your servers and front of house staff have to be good spokespeople to understand not only what is on the plate, but why it's there and where it comes from and why that's important. That's challenging, but, that's how you build the public awareness and, get people on board and make them aware not only for what you're doing, but for what they can do in their own buying capacity. Those are just some fun techniques that I have used. Meet the farmer dinners, something I did at Applewood, and I know others do, and are really fun events where you can bring the farmer in, do a tasting menu. The farmer gets to talk to the diners, you get to talk to the diners. There's a whole conversation with the farmer and the diner, and it's awesome. Special tasting menus, meatless Monday menus. I'd say vegetarian menus all the time. Special vegetarian tasting menus are great. Why limit ourselves to Mondays? And then just sort of little menu inserts or other info. Ways to communicate information, maybe not necessarily in the menu, but to feature a certain farmer that you're working with, give their information, really highlight them or a special product or something. And then, this happens all over the place, but listing the farmers that you work with, but, having their contact information as well and what farmers markets they're at and how consumers can, buy from them directly also. There's a lot of challenges. There's some ways, especially if you're a larger operation, to deal with them. Food hubs, food policy councils can actually be really great ways to make connections with other food businesses or players in the food system who can make connections with other businesses who are doing the same thing or can help utilize product, especially waste. And then, existing purveyors, when they know that, sourcing locally is important, can actually be really wonderful partners as well. And then just super briefly, I want to just talk about a couple other challenges. The food waste. We waste a ton of food in this country. Restaurants are actually a big part of that problem and are in a position to be able to really do something about that. 150,000 pounds of edible food waste on average per year from every single restaurant. It's a lot. That mostly ends up in landfills. the mantra of use everything applies to this as well, but also seeking out composting opportunities. Part of the conversation with other farmers, or maybe with urban gardening or schools who are implementing garden programs. And again, food policy councils can be helpful with that. And this is where my research really focuses on now, but we don't see this as much when we're really in our restaurant bubbles, I guess, and dealing with people who are really into food, but Americans really don't cook that much anymore. And, conventional wisdom is that 1.5 to 2 generations of Americans really don't have any cooking skills to speak of anymore. And this is a problem because, that makes us more dependent on foods prepared away from home, our restaurant foods, which is great, but also fast foods and also convenience foods, which are heavily processed and come from, big food industry giants and are really, a huge source of excess calories. They're also stripping the environment from resources. And it presents a real challenge to a lot of the other food systems policies that are attempting to address things like the obesity crisis and other diet-related issues. And if we're not learning to cook from our parents, because we've got 2 generations of people who really don't know how to cook, and schools aren't teaching how to cook as much or in the same way as they were before, where are we going to learn? And I think that chefs really have a lot of power, a lot of credibility, and a lot of intimate knowledge about cooking that people outside of the restaurant industry really don't, or not just the restaurant industry, but people who really know how to cook. I experienced this really starkly when I left the restaurant field, and people who even were very into food. There's a lot of fear around cooking. There's a lot of just lack of skills and knowledge about what to do and how to interact with their food. And I think that chefs can be super powerful in this area. And, I think we're all, it's important to have more voices saying that, people knowing how to cook and knowing what to do with their food is an important barrier to the success of a lot of the policies that we're sort of moving ahead with in our food system now. And we need to figure out how to do something about that. I know we all have tons of time to volunteer and do other things when we're not in our kitchens, but, adopting a school or a classroom or working with kids, even just acting as a kind of mentor, getting that information out and just kind of getting it on the policy agenda. People listen to chefs, especially when they're talking about cooking and food. So I think just being cognizant of that, it's something you can be a little isolated from, because there are, on the other side of the equation, a lot of foodies, but there's also a very real large segment of the population who don't know how to cook. So I guess I just end on the note to say that there are many opportunities to buy local, to support your local food system, to try and implement things, and it's not really that hard, and just to be aware that you have a lot of credibility and use it wisely when you're making these changes. Thank you.